Okay, hi, everybody. And we're winding up now on this section on the 6 stages of discipleship. Impossible to know just yet whether it will be completed today. Of course, there's no completion, really. What we have to do is somehow really, over the years, absorb what the Tibetan has given. But we are, at least on program 25, we did a little interim program between the chela within the master's aura and now beginning with the chela within the master's heart. That's page 767 or so, 766. Maybe I put that in. And by 773, we are at least concluded with this section. So he's been spending quite a bit of time talking about why he does not spend a lot of time with the describing in detail, maybe a little bit in general, but not in detail, the permanent atoms. And he basically says to the advancing student, there's no need for you to give time and consideration to them. If you are living as desired, and if you are seeking to profit by my instructions, he says, the training of the lower nature and the development of the forces which function as form, however divinely consecrated, will proceed normally and safely. I mentioned the permanent atoms to show the lines of energy distribution, but not in order to indicate any need for a mental interest in these aspects of the form. And basically, maybe there are some specially focused people in the scientific ashrams who will have to learn about them, but already they are not the necessarily the disciples who are bringing through triadal energy, which would stimulate in their nature the permanent atoms to the point of interference with their normal progression. Okay. Just testing that we are in the right place. Because when we're not, it does cause some grievance over several days. Now we go on to the chela in the master's heart. And this is program 25. Maybe there will be a 26 or a 27. I don't know. We'll see. Tonight is the night of the year. In this year, it's the night of the full moon in Cancer. So only so much can be done. So now he says we arrive at a consideration of the last of the 6 stages of discipleship. He's not really counting the 7th stage. That 7th stage being the blending of the lights and involves the high initiate Chela becoming a master of the wisdom. So he described the sixth stage in the following way. The stage where the disciple is in close touch, always. He is being definitely prepared for immediate initiation, and it's a high one. It's not one of our initiations of the threshold. One must certainly be at least the Chela within the aura to enter the stage, and the Chela within the aura is already an initiate, in the sense that the master considers the initiate to be. So he is definitely being prepared for immediate initiation, a high initiation. And let's see, I'll try to gather. Yeah. So I'll indicate a high initiation, or having taken initiation, it's probably the 4th degree, or having taken initiation is given specialized work. And this is work that is really integral to the outflow of the quality of the ashram. At this stage, he is described as Chela within his master's heart. I suppose this would be applied to any to any of the Ray ashrams. And it's not, as I earlier said, it's not meant to be a sentimental type of title, as DK goes on here to explain, so we don't become misled, as if somehow the master does not have a heart interest in his Chela, even from early times. The master has that. And this means a special type of relationship, but not necessarily one in which finally the master loves the Chela and has a special heart-to-heart connection. It depends on what we call the heart. Sometimes we have to remember that the soul is the heart. And we have to remember that the monadic plane, on the cosmic physical plane, is the second plane. And on the levels below, let's say in the personality, the heart center is found on the second subplane. So the master's heart can even be his being on the monadic plane. But going on with Master DK's words, one thing I would here emphasize as I seek to give some light upon this subject, some but not all, obviously. Being within the Master's heart in no way indicates a love relationship between Master and disciple. That's an important statement. The normal reaction when, let's say, the uninformed or incompletely illumined initiate disciple, or maybe just disciple, the normal reaction is that at last the disciple has merited the right to be truly loved and therefore to be truly close to the Master. His life or lives of service have brought him at last that reward. He has now free access to the Master in the closest possible and mutual relationship of loving understanding. However, we see that DK is telling us that this stage of discipleship is not about that at all. He says it has absolutely no reference to this at all. So then what? What can it mean? Well, you know, this is a kind of a emotional assessment from the disciples' present stage of evolution. You'll learn more. So DK is telling us, no, this is not as the Master, rather, the disciple imagines it to be. For another thing, brother of mine, DK goes on, when the disciple reaches this stage, he is no longer what you understand as an accepted disciple. Apparently, there are higher and higher stages of accepted discipleship. Usually it's considered the third stage, but that status, it seems, continues on even as the disciple is becoming the initiate disciple. And maybe that's why the word initiate is paired with the word disciple when we start talking about Chela on the thread and Chela within the aura. So he is no longer what we refer to normally as the accepted disciple. The whole thing is quite intricate, isn't it? There's a lot in outline form, in highly organized outline form, that we have to simply assimilate. So when a disciple reaches this stage, he is an initiate of high standing and elevated degree, and has passed out of the supervision and safeguarding of a master into direct relation with the master of all masters, who is the central Christ, who is the hierarchy. The master is the central point in an ashram. Well, this is important. And he is an initiate of high standing. For instance, a fourth degree initiate, for instance. And that would fit, of course, because to be in a direct relation with the master of all masters does suggest the kind of renunciation that the fourth degree brings. We remember it was the rich young man of the third degree who did not follow the Christ when the Christ asked him to sell all he had. It's symbolic, isn't it? Give the proceeds to the poor. So do everything he could out of his causal body, and then follow me, the Christ. So this is suggesting a particular relationship to the master of masters. And that really has to be borne in mind. It's not so much anymore the supervision by the master of the initiate disciples ashram, but indeed by the great Lord, a direct relation with the master of all masters, the Christ. So we begin to see what a high stage this really is. The master is the heart of his group, and the Christ is the heart of the hierarchy. The closer one gets to realization, the clearer the concept that the point at the center and the periphery are one. So here and up to this time, we've been talking a lot about the relationship of the chela, probationary, accepted later, to until he becomes an initiate. All three of those stages, we've been talking about the relationship of that chela to his own master. And now there comes a special relationship to the Christ. Now, how I look at this is that, of course, Master DK, for instance, is in the Ray ashram of Master Kuthumi. But at one point, he calls himself the disciple of the Christ, and he treats his relationship with the Christ as a direct relationship between chela, which he is, and master, the Christ being the master. So that line of relationship, Christ, Kutumi, Master, DK, for instance, that triangle stands firm, and Master DK has a relationship to both Master Kutumi and to the Christ. I was kind of, for a moment, taken back when Master DK called the Christ his master. But I realized that it does not mean that he does not also, and in a different way, consider Master Kutumi to be his master. The contexts are simply different. Now, heart. Says Master DK, the significance of the word heart is the significance of life itself, as it beats eternally at the very heart of the universe. Within that life, the initiate now consciously stands, realizing himself not so much as being a recipient of life, but as a distributor of life. This is a very different thing and holds the key to this stage of discipleship. So that's even a different perspective than the one I was using. Life itself. Now, let's examine that. The significance of the word heart. See, so often if we're materially minded, we hear the word heart and we immediately think of the physical organ, or perhaps of the chakra associated with the physical organ. But this significance goes higher, and significance, again, is an interesting word because it implies the triadal perspective. The significance of the word heart is the significance of life itself as it beats eternally at the very heart of the universe. Now, what relationship has the Shela now to this? Within that life, and remember, life is the very interior of the monad. So we're going to relate heart and monad as well as heart in various of its lower meanings. Within that life, the initiate now consciously stands. Now, just imagine that for a moment. You're standing within life itself, and you are deeply identified as that life. Not just it is something, and you are the recipient of it, but you are it, and you find a way to distribute that life, to animate others for whom you may have a responsibility. This is a very different thing, says the Tibetan, and holds the key to this stage of discipleship. And DK says something holds the key, we want to ponder what he means. So it's ahead of us, just the way identification as the monad or as pure being, and being able to wield what that identification produces is far ahead of us, okay? But let's at least try not to fall into the usual cliched interpretations. With a cliche, you receive it immediately. It's a ready perspective, it's a ready thought form, and as DK advises us so often, the cliche is not really correct, however easily accessible it is. Okay, so now he goes on with the technicality regarding the term heart and then master's heart. The master's heart is a technical term indicating the sources of life and many analogous interpretations. The sources of life. Now, as we begin searching along the Antakarana, we're finally interested in the sources of life. It's so easy to consider ourselves as the recipient of some energy, but to recognize it experientially and to know that somehow we are that, that's another step. This is the stage This is at this stage, and after a certain major initiation, no, I'm sorry, I misread it. There is at this stage, and after a certain major initiation, a direct line of energy or of life, sensed, recognized, active, and utilized between the conscious disciple on quite a high level, and I think this certain major initiation is the, let's see, I thought I had that. Third initiation, probably. Of course, the major initiations begin with the third. Consider the first. There's a direct line of energy or life, sensed energy or life, and I will say from the monad, sensed, recognized, active, and utilized between the conscious disciple, we might say conscious in a new way, and the disciple's heart center. Now, he goes all the way down to the lower point. The disciple's heart center. We know that in that heart center, we find life. That we have often been told. The heart center in the head, we're rising now. The egoic lotus, which until the fourth initiation is the heart center of the monadic life. The master at the center of his group, he is the monadic center, but in a certain way, he is the heart of his group. He's a number of things. And the Christ, the heart center of the hierarchy. Note, sometimes he is considered to be the director of the hierarchy, which implies a more head-centered function. And finally, the life of the monad, the very interior life of the highest aspect of man, before he begins to start merging with other monads and becomes collectively something else. And the life of the monad, which begins to make itself felt at the third initiation. Well, okay. This might be, as I said, the third degree, or it might be the fourth degree, in which so much about a direct connection with the monad is appreciated. And recognized. A certain major initiation, and then he gets down to it. And talks about the monad beginning to be felt at the third initiation. By the time we reach the fourth initiation, the monad is indeed in a much more direct line with the consciousness or awareness of the initiate disciple. Now, all of these different academic terms, they do point the way to some inevitability as we tread this path. But, as I so often say, being somewhat Cancerian in my nature, the menu is not the meal. And so the academics that we learn about the real state are not the real state. So we're interested in this direct line of energy from the sources of life. Maybe we can speak of an equivalence between energy, life, and being. But we're, climbing that ladder using the rungs made available to us, and the immediate experience, of course, in my own language, I would call it an inperience, okay? But for the sake of clarity, the usual experience on each one of these higher rungs or points of tension, which allow for greater receptivity and greater expression, are not yet ours. But one day they shall be. But anyway, in terms of sensed energy, something does change. Just want to make sure that everything is satisfactory here. There are so many little buttons and ways to invalidate a broadcast, only to discover to one's shock and horror that hours have been spent for nothing. So I wish you better luck than I have had with some of these broadcasts. So recognizing the line of energy from life. Indicating the sources of life. And analogous interpretations. We can call these sources by different names, such as entified radiation. We can call them ever more elevated points of tension. DK does a lot of hinting. And in the hinting, he sharpens our intuition if we will engage with his hints. So anyway, from the sources of life, which I say the initiate discovers himself to be essentially, descends this something which is newly sensed, recognized, active and activated, and utilized between the conscious disciple, and I want to say disciple initiate at this stage, or initiate disciple, to the disciple's heart center. The heart center in the head, the egoic lotus, which until it is destroyed in 7 different ways, according to its ray, at the 4th initiation, which until the 4th initiation is the heart center of the monadic life. And then to the master at the center of this group. Is he a heart? Is he a head? Maybe he's both. The Christ, the heart center of the hierarchy, and in a way, the head of the hierarchy in a directorial sense. Then the life of the monad, which only begins to make itself felt at the 3rd degree. And then the Lord of life himself, the heart center of Shambhala, and who is to say that he's not also the head center of Shambhala? But this is a descent of life via various hearts. And since life is in the heart, a whole new relationship is going to exist between us at these higher points of tension, and we will live in a different way. And that's what we want. The Tibetan wants us to live properly. Not necessarily most of us go off on a study of minutia, unless we are specifically assigned to do so in relation to one of the scientific ashrams. I mean, it is useful, isn't it, that the nature of the atom is being slowly revealed to scientific students. It will also be useful if it can be kept under control for a truer nature of the atom in terms of energy force can be revealed to those esoteric students whose task it is. And that will be done through a study of permanent atoms, spirille, bubbles in the koila, as is brought forward in the work of a former head of the Theosophical Society, Jinara Jadasa, was the book, The Key to Theosophy. I'm trying to remember. So DK goes on. The line of relationship then extends from these outward and outward and upward, spherically considered, to the life at the very center of the Earth's alter ego, the planet Venus, to Jupiter, also strongly related to the causal body and containing, as Venus does, though differently located, much second ray, and thence to the solar Lord himself, a great second ray being on the soul level, and on to a point in the sun Sirius, who is called, for our purposes, the cosmic Christ, and has probably finally the second ray major monad. So there's a great extension going on here. And, since it's such a second ray extension, I feel obliged to put it in the indigo, although I'm often not able to do things as accurately as I would. Well, where would we get information like this, so logical in terms of the ray assignments, and so expansive? Now, these are the things, and not the permanent atoms per se, to which we are to attend. You can see, DK says, you can see, therefore, how different this stage is from being what might be imagined. So many higher points of tension, which are as hearts. And that's why we have to read very carefully. If we allow ourselves to fall into cliched thoughts, we may be instantly gratified that we have grasped something, but it won't be what is correct. So this stage, he says, it is one which marks a new stage of departure or beginning, and a great transition Now, just would you not say that the sixth initiation also marks a great transition? Because from that point on, at least now, a great adventure begins towards other sacred planets and towards the cosmic astral plane and towards various constellations and their lords. Well, here is the sixth stage of discipleship. And a great transition is beginning at sixth stage of discipleship. We have to find ways to translate various phases into various terms. And maybe the angle of the light shed upon these terms, when combined, will bring a greater degree of lucidity. Now we're studying something far, far ahead. It is interesting also that at the sixth initiation, which is not necessarily the initiation in closest relationship to this stage, but at that initiation, in that discussion, the Tibetan goes into what it really means to step onto the real path of initiation, having passed the temptations in the desert and having become on the Syrian line. So there, we might say, a truly serious disciple. And he, that opens the door towards the third initiation, the midway point, in a sense, when considering the sixth initiation. So for whatever reason, he says, when discussing the sixth initiation, now you are confirmed, you are on the Syrian path of initiation, and you are heading for the third degree. So here is a very interesting statement about the stage we're talking about within the Master's heart. It is a stage which one enters through the open door of nirvana. Now, the Atmic plane is called the nirvanic plane, which is interesting. Nirvana, I suppose, has much to do with liberation from stages within the personality to even stages beyond the destruction of the causal body. Anyway, it is a stage, says the Tibetan, which one enters through the open door of nirvana. I suppose obeying the spiritual will is what opens the door of nirvana, and it is the beginning of the path of the higher evolution to which I just compared it. The sixth stage of discipleship and the sixth initiation beginning the way of higher evolution, at least now. Maybe there was a time when it began at the fifth degree. But now it seems the sixth degree is required. It is a stage which marks a specific location, if such an inappropriate word can be used, of the disciple upon the upward way, which is revealed by the lighted way. So, what would we say here? The ordinary path of initiation leads to the way of higher evolution. There's no way to attain this way of higher evolution unless we properly tread the path of initiation and have that way of higher evolution revealed to us at the sixth degree. It is the attainment of the innermost point of realization, called esoterically within the heart. So we're convinced then, are we not, that it is a very high stage with implications that are beyond our usual imaginative surmise. Well, we're learning about things that are far ahead of us. But in a way, we are also learning about how to get there, get to this specific location. All of us, I think, are treading the lighted way, even if at the very beginning stages, which we, in terms of the 6 stages of discipleship, which we would call the little chelaship, which is correlated with the first initiation, the interval between that initiation and the second lasting a long time. All of us who adhere with at least keenly attempted understanding are upon this lighted way. And there are just so many things, experiences to pass through. And it will help if we know with objectivity, with a kind of a detached assessment, what path, what stage of the path we are really passing through. DK goes on. I spoke to you elsewhere about world disciples being close to the Master's heart. Now he's clarifying. This is not the same thing as being within the Master's heart. One refers to the Master upon the disciples' ray. So it's a relationship to one's own sub-ashram, probably. The other refers to the Christ, who is here considered the synthesis of all, within hierarchy of all the rays. So that's of importance. The first is referring to the Master upon the disciples' ray. And the second, interestingly, the Christ being called the synthesis within hierarchy of all the rays. And I suppose this even means the rays of mentality with which you might expect the Christ to have less to do. When you check the various charts, the lines from the Christ seem to go to the 2-4-6 line, but here he is considered that synthesis. So close to the Master's heart and within the Master's heart are two different things. And if we want to be accurate in our work, then we have to note such distinctions. DK goes on. The world today offers opportunity to all disciples to become world disciples, probably, well, initiates of the third degree in certain contexts, close to the Master's heart, and to pass rapidly through the earlier stages of discipleship. It offers opportunity to world disciples to begin their approach to the heart of the hierarchy, the master. It is with this first possibility that you should be concerned. For as you come closer to your group, you can begin to get that training, which will develop in you world usefulness. And that's the same as being a world disciple. It's not just anymore a question of who you reach by what technical means. Big questions coming up here. So, possible attainments lying before us. And then he will have a search for the answer to these questions. And now he asks the question, the big one. And when one reaches certain years, one realizes the seriousness of this question. Are the majority of you too old to achieve this, i.e., world usefulness? That is for you to say. The soul knows no age and can use its instrument if it makes itself into a suitable and available instrument. So certain questions are coming up here. Are you too old? As I sit here, almost, well, not too long before the age of 79, which seems to hearken towards the age of 80, I know this is a serious question. What is world usefulness? And are the evident debilities of the body just too much to achieve this? But then he says, look, the soul is not in itself hampered by age. Of course, sometimes we talk about young souls and old souls, but those are in terms of millions of years and not in terms of one incarnation. Are you too set, he goes on, and too preoccupied with yourselves to achieve the detachment needed for world service? That is for you to find out and prove to yourselves. Are we, well, I don't know how old we all are in the bodily sense. Probably there are quite different ages among us in the bodily sense, but probably quite a few of us are beyond 50, even beyond 60. So there are some younger ones among us, and to them, this should be a kind of incentive to prove to themselves that they are neither too old nor too set in their ways, too preoccupied with themselves. And the difficulty is, of course, to detect if it is true, because this kind of observation can slip beyond us, and we might simply not notice it. So this is for you to find out. Now, maybe is this a little bit of a rebuke? This group has had much opportunity offered to it and much teaching. The output of devotion and service demonstrated by this group, notice he does not speak in terms of the individual so much. The output should be quite unusual, and it should be a group demonstration. And I would ask you, if this is so, the implication is, I'm afraid, that it is not so. Probably there are some, how many out of the 50 approximately held the course? 8, something like 8 at the end, a smaller number, which was taken up, I think, in Discipleship in the New Age, Volume 2. So just imagine the master paying close attention, not only to your soul life, which of course he does in ways that are difficult for us to understand, but actually descending into our personal life and noting the obstructions, which interestingly he said he would not do, except for the fact that probably once he got started, he realized he had to do it, because there would have been those obstructions remaining, which would have blocked the way. And then this very powerful statement: are you too depressed? Which is a synonym for selfishness. Have we put that together for ourselves? And too sensitive to render service to humanity in a larger way than hitherto. This can be overcome if you care enough. Have you thought, have I thought, that depression is a synonym for selfishness? Think about that for a minute. Well, one has to care quite a bit about the condition of the lower instrument to become depressed. I think all of us know what it is. I remember, gosh, things come back to you. I had a friend. He, long ago, of course, he lived his life as a psychiatrist. I've had a number of friends who have been psychiatrists. What does that tell me? And he would call me, we'd talk on the phone, Mike, I'm depressed. And I said, well, Bob, I'm depressed. And together we made quite a combination at certain times. I remember the times and places pretty much. But of course, this was before the days, high school days, before the days of esotericism. DK explains ordinary attitudes to us in such an esoteric manner that we are loath to revisit them in the customary way. These are some questions, aren't they? Because apparently this kind of condition was something that afflicted a number of the disciples. I guess sometimes when you measure your attainments against possible attainments, you can become what is customarily called depressed. The energy, the enlivening, inspiring, stimulating energy just is not getting through. Now this one, goodness, these questions are not exactly in a list, but they are in paragraphs and they follow one another. Is your awareness a constant group awareness, or is it a constant self-awareness which comes consistently between you and your fellow men? That is for you to discover. And I dare say, if we are honest about it, maybe we come closer to the constant self-awareness than to the constant group awareness. And then have you, oh goodness, these are going to be tough, you know. Have you the deep humility based on a realization of the plan and the glory of the goal, and not a sense, this is a good one, not a sense of self-depreciation over over which you gloat and regard as an indication of spiritual humility. You know, the old idea that I'm so bad, I must be good. It's some kind of old Christian habit that man was born in sin and he is old Adam, and except for belief in Jesus, he will not be redeemed from that stage of being old Adam. But this is a very special kind of self-contradictory attitude that people in the Abrahamic religions, some of them develop. They say, oh, I'm nothing. Well, but secretly you think, because I'm nothing, I'm everything. It's contradictory. Because I'm very bad, I must be very good. Because I put myself down, I must be actually quite high. It's not the adjusted sense of right proportion, those are the quotes, which true humility indicates. It's not spiritual humility. You need to reinterpret this theme of humility, as well as all your terms, in the light of esoteric and spiritual values. Can you do this? Well, we'll certainly get our chance, won't we? And right now, I think we may be in the middle of our chance. You know, nothing is really coming to us totally unfairly. Let me just put that in kind of humility. Whoop. No. Is an adjusted sense of right proportion. So if you don't see yourself as you are, you put yourself down or you raise yourself up, you're off the mark. And right proportion will never be yours, as long as you continue that. nor will harmlessness, which has that sense of proportion about it, along with a completed point of view and divine understanding, as we're told in, I think, one of the rules of esoteric healing. So we need to, as kind of an antidote to what we've been through during the past 2,000 years of often self-pitying Pisceanism, we need to reinterpret this sense of humility. It really is the noble middle path. We can't go too far in either direction without deviating from the true path, which will actually lead to spiritual attainment, and not to something which imitates spiritual attainment. Earlier, says the Tibetan, I used a phrase in which I referred to disciples assembling in this cycle at the call of the hierarchy. This, he says, has a definite relation at this time to our theme of discipleship in its various stages. The hierarchy knows when to call, and this is a special time for the changing of the ages. Very big cycles have relatively just come to an end and or are ending, or before long are beginning. The call of the hierarchy goes out to humanity as a whole. It is sent out through the medium of the groups, I suppose, surrounding the ashrams on the periphery, and through the medium of ashrams, which are presided over by many of the masters, not all. It is caught and heard by many different types of people. And in their response, much distortion of that call creeps in. Only the advanced disciple either brings it through correctly or responds adequately. The others respond to partial aspects of the call, and their consequent activity is spasmodic. We don't want to be an approaching and receding point of light, but now and then aspirant or disciple. So the others respond to partial aspects of the call, and their consequent activity is spasmodic, based upon erroneous interpretations, colored by personality faults, delayed by inertia, and often selfishly based. But the response of the disciples in or by the respondents, that is, excuse me, of the disciples in his group or ashram, the master gauges the place and status of the disciple, though there are, of course, many other indicatory evidences. Well, the call of the hierarchy, a very special time in which we are living now. And we could ask, assembling here at the call of the hierarchy, we could ask, do I hear that call? And in what way am I hearing that call? How do I respond? Because the fact that you are studying in groups like this tell us a great deal about the fact that you are somehow responding to the call of the hierarchy. I remember my old teacher, second ray soul, I believe, first ray personality, a Leo ascendant, and I think 6 planets in Pisces. Whoa. And I think I really began to hear the call of the hierarchy in this incarnation when I first met him in 1963. It was a long time ago. Almost, it was 58 years ago. And I was amazed at what I heard. And it was so different, crashing into my otherwise artistic, musical life. But it was a crashing into which came to be supremely valued. And you can think back in your life, because in a way, many of us have been on this path, this lighted way, for quite a while, with various degrees of consistency. But then there's a recapitulation. And again, you hear the call of the hierarchy. You awaken somehow to what you might have known before. You pick up the thread and you go on. The trigger point can be anything. Maybe, as I said, I had a friend who saw all the Alice Bailey books in hard copy together, awakening. For me, it was the strange words of a significant and experienced teacher Others will have other ways of awakening, some phenomenon, something occurring within the personality which had not occurred before, and linking it to a higher power. Different people will have different methods of awakening to the call of the hierarchy. Will you respond? And what will be the nature of your response? There's all kinds of ways to respond. I'm often saying, I know, I remember, that's the Lord of history here, but I remember the day when the kind of a acquaintance of mine, an astute astrologer, ran into the same teacher that I had. And I witnessed it from across the street, and I wondered, how will this go? And it was a fight. It was a battle. It was a protest. And yet with such a magnetic attraction that my friend could not just leap. And he turned out to be one of the foremost adherents and beneficiaries of this teacher. Over time, the truth won. And he has been very helpful to me, providing me with photographs and so forth, which otherwise I might not have had, and providing me with birth data, since he was an astrologer. And I suspect somehow distributing knowledge of what he was taught. I don't know exactly what he was taught because my conversations with him have been rare and not always on that subject by any means. But I know that I got the seed of identification implanted in my consciousness by this teacher. And I guess, although I didn't realize it, I was pretty fertile soil for that type of implantation, which became for me hugely important over time. Somehow, if we are seeking the truth sincerely, it will come to us. And we have to be alert to the manner in which it comes. But as in the labors of Hercules, the Gemini labor, we're not always aware when Nereus, the symbol of the intuition, whispers to us. We often fail that particular test. I didn't know what I was getting into, maybe. I didn't know. But I knew that it had a huge magnetism and that it was impossible to abandon it. Now, we've talked about the call of hierarchy, which is strongly resounding these days, and which is calling its opposite to the surface. The rise of evil, the rise of authoritarianism is with us again. The egotistical view of life, the life of those who keep their eye too much upon the little person itself. But I suppose that's happening because the call of hierarchy is so strong. So then, let us look at some of the types of people who respond to the call. Most of them, this is where we come in, of course, do so unconsciously. And let's just say, this we have to correct, but we act sympathetically because something in them synchronizes with the call, or because they are sensitive to certain vibratory influences. So let's look at the entire call as being coming out of the great second ray. There are many ways to respond to the call, and the rays are very diverse, but if they seek or attempt to reach the uplift of humanity, the improvement of the human state, and eventually the improvement of the planetary state, then they come under the great second ray. So I'm just assuming that so many of us have responded, are responding to the call. It's a lot used in Christian terminology. I remember the story of a minister who desperately wanted his son to be a minister like he was. And he would ask his son, "Have you heard the call yet? Has the call come to you?" You know. But this like father, like son, it can lead to a lot of unhappiness. I don't know the outcome, whether that individual ever became as his father had hoped, or whether his line was something different. But even if his line was something different, he was still, in his own way, responding to the call. And who are these people who respond to the call? Friends, I've made a decision here. I thought that program number 25 would end our examination of these 6 stages of discipleship. But since Tui and I have this sacred pentagram broadcast, and since I have the pre-full moon coming up in a few hours, I'm going to rather end, probably tomorrow, with program 26. 26 letters in the alphabet. It's a good number. And we are very close now to the end of the discussion. So you will receive this either on Makara or on our YouTube channel, Moria Federation, Esoteric Education. And we're on right at the juncture between 769 and 770, and it ends with 773. So I don't see why we should not be able to finish next time. And we're talking specifically about the people who hear the call and how they respond to the call at their various levels of development. I'm speaking of the call of the hierarchy. There are so many crystallizations which have been around a long time. They have to break up finally, if we can manage. And let's see here. Well, this should be working. I hope it's working. I certainly do hate to do a pantomime show for you. But there are all different modes of response, and that is what we will get into next time. I hope to have this somehow completed in as much as completeness as possible by tomorrow. But right now, we'll say goodbye from Tuya and myself and all of the communications team, wishing you love and many blessings, profound study and deep meditation and useful application of what you have learned so far. I know many of you have read this over the years, but it all depends on our assimilation depends on the depth of our reading. And I know very well that even after having given a lot of attention to this, word for word, so to speak, I could benefit right now by going back and doing it all over again. And it would sink in gradually. That's, as the Tibetan has told us, he's given us more than we can ever absorb. Of course, that's true. But the amount and depth of our absorption is very much our own issue, and according to our sense of spiritual values. So I think we know that. So let us proceed, and probably by tomorrow we'll indicate the end of this particular section, and then my big job is to discover what in addition what other books and so forth need to be presented and worked upon. Bye for now.